notification lit up Colette's laptop screen at 3:47 on a Tuesday afternoon. She clicked it open, expecting routine test results about her 6-year-old son's stomach pain. Instead, 3 words stopped her heart cold. Probability of paternity, 0%. She blinked, read it again. Her hands went numb, 0%. Damon Hartley, the billionaire who'd left her humiliated at the altar 6 years ago, pregnant and alone in front of 300 guests, wasn't the father of her twin boys. But that was impossible. She'd been faithful. Completely, utterly faithful. There'd been no one else. So how could the man she'd loved, the man whose children she'd raised alone while he married his mistress and lived his perfect life, suddenly not be their biological father? Here's the truth most people won't tell you. Sometimes the man who abandons you isn't running from commitment. He's running from a truth he never bothered to share. Colette's mind raced back to that morning, the morning her entire world shattered. She'd been standing in her wedding gown, champagne in hand, 4 months pregnant and glowing. The venue was perfect. The roses were blooming. Her future felt certain. Then came the text, "Meet me in the East Garden. We need to talk." What she found there destroyed her. Damon standing beside a woman in crimson, his mistress. The cold look in his eyes, the words that still haunted her. "This isn't going to work. I can't do this anymore." He'd walked away. Just walked away like their 3 years together, their unborn child, their promises meant nothing. News outlets had a field day. Her face, tear-stained and broken, went viral within hours. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a theory. But no one knew the real story, because 6 years later, a simple DNA test revealed something nobody saw coming. Not the guests who'd whispered at that ruined wedding. Not news outlets who'd painted her as the abandoned bride. Not even Colette herself. What Damon had been hiding, what he'd known all along, was about to blow his carefully constructed life into pieces. Before we get into what happened next, do me a favor. Hit that like button if you're already hooked. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And subscribe to the Penthouse Diaries, because this story takes turns that'll leave you speechless. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. The DNA results were just the beginning. The truth? That was buried much, much deeper. To understand how everything fell apart, you need to know how it all began. Colette met Damon Hartley at a children's literacy fundraiser 3 years before that ruined wedding. She almost didn't go. Her best friend Rachel had dragged her there, insisting she needed to get out of her studio apartment and meet actual humans for once. The venue was one of those historic mansions in Pacific Heights, the kind with marble floors and crystal chandeliers that made Colette feel like she was wearing the wrong shoes. She was nursing a glass of sparkling water near the silent auction tables when he approached. "You're the illustrator," Damon said, not as a question but as fact. She turned, tall, dark-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but his smile was warm, genuinely warm. "How did you... Your work is on half the display boards in the children's section. The little mountain that loved the sky. I bought 3 copies for my nieces." He extended his hand. Damon Hartley. She recognized the name. Everyone in San Francisco knew the Hartley family. His grandfather had built a tech empire from nothing. Damon now ran it, worth billions according to Forbes. But what struck her wasn't the wealth. It was the way he talked about her illustrations. He'd noticed the hidden animals she tucked into backgrounds. The color gradients that shifted with the characters' emotions. Details most adults skimmed right past. They talked for 2 hours that night. Then he asked if she'd have dinner with him the following week. Their romance unfolded like something from the stories Colette illustrated. He'd show up at her tiny studio in North Beach with Thai food and watch her paint for hours, asking questions about technique and inspiration. She'd meet him at his office downtown, and they'd walk through Chinatown, grabbing dumplings from hole-in-the-wall places his driver had never taken him to. He had homes in 3 countries, a private jet, and enough money to buy whatever he wanted. But what he wanted, it seemed, was her. Just her. "You make me feel human again," he told her one night on her apartment's fire escape, the city lights twinkling below. "Everyone else sees the name, the bank account, the connections. You see me, she believed him. God, she believed every word. About 18 months into their relationship, they visited a fertility specialist for a consultation. They'd been talking about marriage, about starting a family eventually. The doctor recommended some preliminary testing, just baseline information for future planning. Colette remembered Damon getting quiet on the drive home. His phone had rung halfway through the appointment, and he'd stepped into the hallway to take it. When he returned, something in his expression had shifted, tighter, more guarded. "Everything okay?" she'd asked. "Just work. The Tokyo merger is getting complicated." He'd smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Nothing to worry about, she'd let it go. He ran a multinational company. Of course, work called at inconvenient times. 4 months later, she found herself staring at a positive pregnancy test in her bathroom. Terror gripped her. They weren't married yet. Would he feel trapped? Pressured? She told him that evening in her kitchen, her hands shaking as she held out the test. Damon stared at it for what felt like forever. Then he dropped to his knees, right there on the worn linoleum, tears streaming down his face. "Marry me," he whispered. "Please, Colette. Marry me and let me spend the rest of my life making you happy." She said yes. Of course she said yes. The next 3 months flew by in a blur of wedding planning, morning sickness, and pure joy. Damon hired the best planners, booked the most exclusive venue, spared no expense. He wanted everything perfect for her, he said, for their future. She floated through those weeks convinced she was the luckiest woman alive. A man who loved her completely, a baby on the way, a future that sparkled like those city lights they used to watch from her fire escape. She had no idea she was living in a carefully constructed lie. And the morning of her wedding, it would all come crashing down. The morning of June 14th began like a dream. Colette's bridal suite overlooked the ceremony space. 300 white chairs arranged in perfect rows, rose arches framing the aisle. String quartet warming up beneath oak trees. Her bridesmaids fussed with her cathedral veil while champagne bubbled in crystal flutes. At 4 months along, her gown had been specially designed to accommodate her growing belly, and she'd never felt more beautiful. Her phone buzzed at 10:47 a.m., 30 minutes before she was supposed to walk down that aisle. The text was from Damon Eastgarden, now. "Come alone." Her stomach dropped. Something felt wrong. The tone was cold, detached, nothing like the man who'd texted her, "I can't wait to marry you," just that morning. She gathered her skirts and slipped out the side entrance, heels clicking against stone pathways. The East Garden was secluded, hidden behind tall hedges where guests couldn't see. That's where she found him. Damon stood beneath a willow tree, his back rigid. But he wasn't alone. A woman in a crimson dress leaned against him, her hand resting on his chest with obvious familiarity. Colette recognized her instantly. Simone Duchamp, the French model who appeared in major news outlets at exclusive parties and yacht clubs. "Damon?" Her voice came out small, uncertain. He turned slowly. The warmth she'd fallen in love with was gone. His eyes were flat, empty. "This isn't happening," he said. No preamble, no explanation. The world tilted beneath her feet. "What are you talking about? Our guests are waiting. I'm pregnant with your... I know what you are..." He cut her off with a wave of his hand. "And I can't go through with this. The wedding, the marriage, this whole charade. Charade." The word hit like a slap. Simone smiled, sharp and predatory. "He's been with me for 8 months, darling. Did you really think a man like Damon would settle for someone like you? 8 months. Before the pregnancy. Before the proposal. Before she'd believed every lie he'd fed her. Damon, please." Tears burned her eyes. "Whatever this is, whatever's going on, we can talk about it. We can fix..." "There's nothing to fix." His tone remained flat. Bored almost. "Send my lawyer the medical bills. I'll provide financial support for the child. That's all you're getting from me. What about us? What about everything you promised?" Simone laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "Promises? Sweetheart, men like Damon make promises to women like me. You were just convenient." Then they walked away. Just turned and left like they were leaving a restaurant, not destroying a life. Colette stood frozen, one hand pressed against her belly, trying to process what had just happened. Her wedding planner found her 15 minutes later, mascara streaking her face, her veil caught on a branch. Have you or someone you know been publicly humiliated by someone they trusted? Comment below what you would have done in Colette's position. And if you're feeling the rage right now, trust me, I'm right there with you. Smash that like button. But here's the thing, this story takes a turn no one saw coming. The revenge Colette gets? It's better than anything she could have planned, so stay with me. Her father made the announcement to the 300 guests. She never knew his exact words, only that the collective gasp reached her in the bridal suite where she'd collapsed on the floor, still in her gown, still unable to believe this was real. The whispers started immediately. Guests checked their phones, texted friends. Within an hour, news crews had arrived. Someone had tipped them off, probably Simone, who'd want the world to know she'd won. By evening, Colette's tear-stained face was trending across every social media platform. The headlines were brutal. Pregnant bride abandoned at altar by tech billionaire. Damon Hartley ditches fiancée for supermodel hours before wedding. 300 guests watch as billionaire groom fails to show. The photos were worse. Her face, devastated and raw, captured in high definition. The empty altar, the wilting roses, the abandoned reception hall with untouched wedding cake and unopened champagne. The world watched her humiliation in real time. Strangers debated what she must have done wrong, how she must have failed to keep him. Why would a billionaire leave unless there was something deeply flawed about her? Nobody asked why he'd lied, why he'd proposed if he didn't mean it, why he'd let it get this far. They just assumed she was the problem. And Colette, alone in that hotel room with her ruined gown pulled around her feet and her unborn child growing inside her, believed them. She had no idea that 6 years later, the truth would destroy Damon's entire world. Colette gave birth to twin boys that November, Finley and Reed. They arrived 3 weeks early, small but healthy, with Damon's dark hair and sharp features. The nurse asked if she wanted to call the father. She said no. The financial support started arriving the following month. Wire transfers processed through a law firm in downtown San Francisco. No phone calls, no visits, no inquiry about whether the boys were healthy or what they looked like or if they'd smiled yet. Just cold, clinical deposits that appeared in her account like clockwork. 2 years after abandoning her, Damon married Simone in Monaco. The wedding photos flooded every gossip site and magazine. The couple on a yacht, champagne glasses raised, designer gowns and tailored suits. The captions gushed about their fairy tale romance and perfect love story. Colette saw those photos while feeding Reed at 2 a.m., her hair unwashed, her eyes hollow from exhaustion. She stared at Damon's smile, the same smile he'd given her once, and felt nothing. The grief had burned itself out, leaving only ash. She moved to Portland when the twins turned 1. San Francisco held too many ghosts, too many places where strangers recognized her as that woman from the wedding. Portland offered anonymity, a fresh start. She rented a small house with a backyard where the boys could play. Her illustration work picked up gradually. Freelance projects for small publishers, then a contract with a regional children's book company. The paychecks weren't impressive, but they were hers, earned through her own talent, not deposited by lawyers. Her first major break came when the twins were 3. A publishing house in New York offered her a book deal, 10 illustrations for a series about mountain animals. The advance was modest, but it felt like validation, like proof she existed beyond that ruined wedding day. She bought the house outright when the boys turned 4. Nothing fancy, just a 3-bedroom craftsman with creaky floors and a porch swing. But it belonged to her. No one could take it away. Dating happened occasionally, carefully. She'd meet someone through mutual friends, go to dinner a few times, but never brought anyone home. The twins didn't need confusion. They needed stability. They asked about their father sometimes, age-appropriate questions that broke her heart in quiet ways. Why doesn't Daddy visit us? Does he know we like dinosaurs? Did we do something wrong? She'd explained it as best she could. That sometimes adults make choices that hurt people. That their father sends money to help take care of them. but he's chosen not to be part of their lives. That his choice had nothing to do with them. They were wonderful, perfect, loved beyond measure. When Finley was 5, he drew a picture of their family, just the 3 of them, holding hands under a rainbow. No fourth figure. He'd already stopped waiting. One Tuesday afternoon, when the boys were at kindergarten, Colette found herself drafting an email to Damon's legal team. Reed had been complaining about stomach pain for days. Nothing serious, probably, but shouldn't their father know? Shouldn't he care? Her finger hovered over the send button. Then she deleted the entire message. He'd made his choice 6 years ago. She wouldn't beg for scraps of concern now. The stomach pain persisted, though, mild but consistent. Their pediatrician recommended keeping a symptom log. Probably nothing, Dr. Hoffman said, but let's monitor it. Meanwhile, news outlets continued chronicling Damon and Simone's glamorous existence. Charity galas, exotic vacations, business deals worth millions. His empire kept expanding while Colette packed school lunches and scheduled parent-teacher conferences. She'd built a good life, a real life, and she was proud of that. She had no idea that Reed's stomach pain would lead to a discovery that would shatter everything Damon had built. Reed's stomach pain got worse in March. What had started as occasional discomfort became persistent enough that Dr. Hoffman ordered more extensive testing. Blood work, ultrasounds. Everything came back inconclusive. The doctor sat Colette down in his office, his expression calm but serious. "I'd like to recommend genetic screening," he said. "Sometimes hereditary conditions don't show up in standard tests. If there's a genetic component, we need to identify it early." The process required DNA samples from both parents when available. Colette felt her stomach drop. Reaching out to Damon meant reopening a door she'd locked 6 years ago. But this was about Reed's health. Her pride didn't matter. She contacted his legal team through the same email address that sent the monthly deposits. Her message was clinical: medical necessity, genetic screening, request for DNA sample. She kept it brief, professional. 3 weeks passed before the response came. Not from Damon, of course not, but from his attorneys. A courier would deliver the required sample. No further communication needed. When the package arrived, it contained a sealed medical specimen and nothing else. No note asking about Reed's symptoms. No inquiry about whether the boys were okay. Just a cold, sterile sample in clinical packaging. Colette sent both samples to the testing facility her doctor recommended. The turnaround time was 2 to 3 weeks. She tried not to obsess over it, tried to focus on work and the boys' school projects and the everyday routines that kept her grounded. The email arrived on a Tuesday at 3:47 p.m. She'd been working on illustrations for a new book series, Woodland Adventures in Autumn Settings. The notification popped up on her laptop: genetic testing results available. She clicked the link expecting information about hereditary disorders. Instead, 3 words stopped her heart: probability of paternity, 0%. She blinked. Read it again, scrolled down to make sure she was reading the correct report. Damon Hartley was not the biological father of Finley and Reed. Her hands went numb. This was impossible. She'd been faithful, completely, utterly faithful. There had been no one else, not before Damon, not during their relationship. The timeline didn't allow for any other possibility. So how could this be? Her mind raced through every possible explanation. Lab error? She checked the sample numbers, they matched. Contamination? The report showed proper protocols had been followed. Then a memory surfaced, hazy at first, then sharpening into focus. The fertility clinic. That consultation 18 months before she conceived. They'd gone for preliminary testing, just baseline information for future family planning. The doctor had taken samples from both of them. Colette opened a new browser tab and searched Prescott Fertility Center, San Francisco. The results loaded. Her breath caught. The clinic had been shut down 4 years ago following a massive scandal. The director had been caught switching samples, implanting embryos into the wrong patients, falsifying records. Over 200 families had been affected. The dates lined up perfectly. She and Damon had visited Prescott months before she conceived. Her hands shook as she clicked through article after article. Lawsuits, settlements, families torn apart by discovering their children weren't biologically theirs, parents finding out their genetic material had been implanted in complete strangers. She found a list of affected patients who'd filed legal action. The names blurred together until one stopped her cold. Preston Blackstone. According to court documents, Preston had sued Prescott after discovering his sample had been mishandled. He'd been trying to start a family with his girlfriend at the time. The relationship had ended when they found out the clinic had used someone else's sample instead of his. Colette cross-referenced dates. Preston had been at Prescott the same month as her and Damon. Same location, same time frame. The realization hit like ice water. The clinic had switched their samples. Someone else, likely Preston, had been inseminated with Damon's genetic material while she'd received Preston's. Finley and Reed weren't Damon's biological children. They were Preston's. But here's where everything you thought you knew gets completely shattered. If Damon wasn't the father, why did he abandon her at that altar? What was he hiding? Comment your theory. Did Damon know about the mix-up? Because trust me, the answer is going to make you furious. Hit subscribe to the Penthouse Diaries right now because the next revelation will blow your mind. This is where justice begins. Colette's thoughts raced. If the clinic had mixed up the samples, if Preston was the biological father, then why had Damon walked away? Had he known? Had someone from the clinic contacted him? She dug deeper, searching for any connection between Damon and the scandal. Nothing appeared in public records. But the clinic had shut down shortly after she conceived. The timeline was too perfect to be coincidence. She needed answers. Not just about the paternity, that was clear now. She needed to know if Damon had abandoned her, knowing full well that the pregnancy wasn't her fault. If he'd let her suffer public humiliation while keeping this secret locked away. Because if he'd known, if he'd hidden this truth while the world called her a failure, while she rebuilt her life from nothing, while she raised 2 boys alone, the betrayal would be even deeper than she'd imagined. Colette needed answers that DNA reports couldn't provide. She hired a private investigator named Margaret Reeves, a former journalist who specialized in corporate fraud cases. Margaret's first task was finding Preston Blackstone. Within 48 hours, she had a full profile. Preston lived in Seattle, ran a successful architectural firm specializing in sustainable design. 43 years old. Never married. No children. His social media showed a quiet life. Hiking photos, building projects, occasional dinners with colleagues. Nothing flashy or performative. But beneath that calm surface was a history of pain directly tied to Prescott Fertility Center. Margaret uncovered medical records from the lawsuit Preston had filed. He and his then-girlfriend had been trying to conceive when the clinic scandal broke. Learning that his genetic material had been mishandled, potentially used for someone else, had devastated him. The relationship ended. Depression followed. He'd spent years in therapy trying to process the violation of having his future stolen by incompetence. This man wanted children more than anything, Margaret told Colette during their follow-up meeting. The clinic destroyed that dream, knowing somewhere out there might be a child with his DNA being raised by strangers. It broke him, but Margaret had found something else. Something that made Colette's blood run cold. Emails, dozens of them, buried in court discovery documents from the Prescott lawsuit, were communications between various patients and the clinic director. Margaret had cross-referenced dates and found correspondence between Damon Hartley and Dr. Bernard Feldman, the clinic's medical director. The first email was dated 7 weeks before the wedding. Mr. Hartley, per our phone conversation, I wanted to follow up regarding the matter we discussed. There appears to have been a procedural error during your consultation visit. I recommend we conduct additional screening to clarify any questions. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience. This matter requires immediate attention. Dr. Feldman. Damon's response came 3 hours later. Doctor, I need absolute discretion. If what you're suggesting is accurate, I need confirmation before proceeding with any plans. What testing can be done without my fiancé's knowledge? Colette's hands shook holding the printout. He'd known. 7 weeks before their wedding, Damon had been told about a possible mix-up. The email chain continued. Dr. Feldman had suggested using cells from the routine amniocentesis Colette had undergone. Standard pregnancy monitoring. Damon authorized the test. Paid extra for expedited processing. Demanded complete confidentiality. The results arrived 12 days before the wedding. Mr. Hartley, the screening is complete. Probability of biological relation, 0%. I strongly recommend we discuss next steps, including how to approach Miss Morrison about the clinic error. We bear full responsibility for this situation. Dr. Feldman. Damon never responded to that email. He'd gotten his answer. That's all he wanted. Margaret found one final message, sent the morning of the wedding from Damon to his attorney. Need you to draft financial support agreement. Child support only, no custody, minimal contact. Standard NDA. She's not to discuss anything publicly. Have it ready Monday. He'd planned everything, the abandonment, the financial arrangement, the silence he'd demand from her. What he hadn't planned was telling Colette the truth. He'd simply assumed she'd cheated, assumed the pregnancy was her betrayal, and rather than have a single conversation, rather than give her the chance to explain what she didn't even know, he'd used Simone as his excuse and walked away. Here's the truth that'll make your blood boil. He didn't leave because he fell out of love. He left because he assumed the worst about her and never bothered to ask the truth. Damon had let Colette become the face of public humiliation, let the world believe she'd somehow failed to keep him, let her raise 2 children alone while he played the generous ex who nobly provided financial support for kids that weren't his problem. All while knowing that a clinic error, not infidelity, had caused the situation. He could have told her, could have explained, could have worked together to find out what really happened. Instead, he'd chosen his pride over her dignity, his assumption over her truth, his convenience over her devastation. Margaret looked at Colette across the coffee shop table. What do you want to do with this? Colette's answer was simple. I want everyone to know what kind of man Damon Hartley really is. The betrayal had been deep. The revenge would be deeper. Colette composed the email 3 times before sending it. She contacted Preston through his architectural firm's website, keeping the message professional but direct. She explained about the fertility clinic, the DNA results, the timeline that connected them. She asked if he'd be willing to meet. His response came within 2 hours. Ms. Morrison, I don't know what to say. Yes, absolutely yes. When and where? They met at a quiet coffee shop in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood on a Saturday morning. Colette arrived early, nerves making her hands shake. She'd rehearsed what to say, but no script felt adequate for this conversation. Preston walked in at exactly 10 a.m. He was different from what she'd expected. No billionaire swagger, no designer clothes. Just a man in jeans and a flannel shirt, sandy hair slightly messy, kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he gave a hesitant smile. Colette? His voice was gentle, uncertain. Preston, thank you for coming. They sat by the window. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Preston broke the silence. Tell me everything. So she did. The wedding, the abandonment, 6 years of raising Finley and Reed alone. The medical screening that led to the discovery. The emails proving Damon had known about the clinic mix-up all along. Preston listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from confusion to anger to something that looked like grief. When she finished, he sat back, his coffee untouched. I have sons, not a question, a statement he needed to say aloud to believe. Possibly. We'd need confirmation testing to be certain, but the timeline. The clinic destroyed my life. His voice broke slightly. My girlfriend and I were trying to start a family. We'd picked out names, painted a nursery. When we found out they'd mishandled everything, that somewhere out there might be a child with my DNA. She couldn't handle it. We fell apart, I spent 2 years in therapy trying to process that violation. He looked directly at Colette. I wanted to be a father more than anything. And they stole that from me. They stole it from both of us, she said quietly. Different ways, same damage. They talked for 3 hours. He showed her photos of his work, buildings designed with children in mind, playgrounds integrated into housing developments, schools with natural light and open spaces. Every project reflected what he'd lost. She showed him pictures of Finley and Reed. Preston stared at them for a long time, tears pooling in his eyes. They have my nose, he whispered. And my grandfather's chin. Are you willing to do the confirmation test? She asked. Yes, absolutely. He met her gaze. But I need you to understand something. If these boys are mine biologically, I don't want to disrupt their lives. I don't want to take them from you or confuse them. I just want the chance to know them, to be part of their lives, in whatever way makes sense. The difference between Preston and Damon couldn't have been starker. One had run from responsibility. The other was reaching for it with trembling, hopeful hands. The confirmation test came back 2 weeks later. 99.9% probability of paternity. Preston Blackstone was the biological father of Finley and Reed, and unlike Damon, he wanted them. Colette didn't file the lawsuit for money. She filed it for truth. Her attorney drafted a claim against the estate of the now-defunct Prescott Fertility Center, seeking damages for emotional distress, loss of opportunities, and the years of public humiliation she'd endured due to their negligence. But here's what made the filing explosive. It required full disclosure of the paternity test results and the timeline of events, including Damon's emails, including his secret screening, including everything he'd hidden. The documents became public record the moment they were filed. Within hours, journalists had copies. By evening, the story had detonated across every news platform and social media site. Billionaire knew about fertility clinic error, abandoned bride anyway. DNA bombshell, Damon Hartley let innocent woman suffer while hiding the truth. Abandoned bride vindicated, real father found after 6 years. The narrative flipped overnight. Suddenly, Colette wasn't the woman who'd failed to keep her billionaire. She was the victim of medical negligence and deliberate cruelty. The public's sympathy, which had been lukewarm at best 6 years ago, now transformed into outrage. Social media exploded with support for her and fury toward Damon. His business partners started distancing themselves, issuing carefully worded statements about reassessing our relationship with Hartley Enterprises. Charity organizations returned his donations, publicly stating they couldn't accept money from someone who'd treated a pregnant woman with such callousness. The business community's rejection hit Damon where it hurt most, his reputation and his empire. Stock prices for his companies dipped. Board members called emergency meetings. Investors started pulling out, but the personal consequences were just as devastating. Simone filed for divorce 3 weeks after the story broke. Her attorney released a statement claiming she'd been misled about the circumstances of Mr. Hartley's previous relationship and had married under false pretenses. Translation: she'd only wanted the billionaire image, and now that image was tarnished beyond repair. News outlets that had once gushed about their fairy tale romance now exposed her as exactly what she was, a social climber who'd latched onto wealth and abandoned ship the moment scandal threatened her lifestyle. She disappeared back to Europe within a month, her brief time as Mrs. Hartley reduced to a cautionary tale about marrying for the wrong reasons. Meanwhile, Preston took his own legal action. He filed for partial custody rights, not to take the boys away from Colette, but to establish his legal standing as their father. His petition was clear. He wanted to be part of Finley and Reed's lives, to know them, to support them, to finally be the father the clinic had stolen from him. The custody hearing was supposed to be private, but details leaked, probably through court staff who couldn't resist sharing such a compelling story. Preston's testimony was devastating in its honesty. He described the years of depression following the clinic scandal, the therapy sessions where he'd grieve children he'd never meet, The broken relationships because he couldn't move past the violation. His voice had broken when describing the moment he learned he actually had sons, that they'd been alive and growing for 6 years while he'd suffered the loss of what he thought was only a possibility. "I didn't even know they existed," he'd said. "I would have been there from day one if I'd known. I would have supported Colette through everything. Instead, I lost 6 years I can never get back." The judge, a woman in her 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense rulings, had turned her attention to Damon's legal team, though he hadn't appeared in person. His attorneys argued he shouldn't have to repay financial support he'd provided in good faith. Her response became legendary. "Mr. Hartley abandoned these children before they were born," she stated, her voice cold and precise. "He discovered they weren't biologically his, assumed infidelity without asking for an explanation, and chose public humiliation over honest conversation. He sent money through lawyers not out of generosity, but to avoid personal responsibility. That is not fatherhood. That is buying silence." She continued. "The real father, Mr. Blackstone, was denied the opportunity to be present for his children's births, their first words, their first steps, because of a clinic error and Mr. Hartley's deliberate concealment of that error. The magnitude of this deception, the years of suffering inflicted on both Miss Morrison and Mr. Blackstone, and the willful nature of Mr. Hartley's actions demand substantial accountability. The final order sent shockwaves through the financial world. $100 million to be paid to Colette and the twins, plus a mandatory public apology acknowledging his actions and their consequences." The courtroom gasped. Legal analysts called it unprecedented. $100 million wasn't just punitive, it was designed to hurt, to make Damon feel the weight of his choices in the language he understood best, money. And it worked. The judgment forced Damon to liquidate assets. His company's valuation plummeted as news spread that their CEO was personally liable for such a massive sum. Board members demanded his resignation. Major clients terminated contracts. The Hartley empire that had taken 3 generations to build began crumbling under the weight of one man's arrogance. If you've ever waited for karma to catch up with someone who hurt you, this is that moment right here. Comment justice if you think Damon got exactly what he deserved. And smash that like button for Colette's victory. This is what happens when the truth finally comes out. Subscribe to the Penthouse Diaries for more stories where karma doesn't just knock, it kicks the door down. Share this with someone who needs to see that patience and truth always win in the end. Damon's public statement came 2 weeks later. It was obviously written by lawyers, sanitized and emotionless. "I deeply regret the circumstances surrounding my relationship with Miss Morrison. I acknowledge that I acted on incomplete information and failed to communicate appropriately. I wish her and her family well moving forward." No real apology. No acknowledgement of the deliberate deception, just corporate language designed to minimize liability. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. Damon Hartley's carefully crafted image, the generous billionaire, the philanthropist, the tech visionary, lay in ruins. His wealth was diminished. His company was shaking. And everyone knew exactly who he really was, a coward who'd chosen his pride over someone else's dignity. Justice had finally arrived. And it cost him everything. Preston didn't rush into the boys' lives. He understood that 6-year-olds needed time to process big changes, and he wasn't about to disrupt the stability Colette had worked so hard to build. They started small, a coffee meeting at Colette's house where Preston brought sketches of buildings he'd designed. Finley was immediately fascinated by the blueprints, tracing his finger along the lines while asking questions about how tall structures stayed standing. Reed was quieter, more observant, but Colette noticed how he leaned in when Preston explained the physics of weight distribution. The second visit, Preston brought a simple building kit, wooden blocks and connectors. The 3 of them spent 2 hours on the living room floor constructing a bridge. Preston let the boys lead, only offering suggestions when they got stuck. He didn't talk about being their father. He just showed up. By the 4th visit, Finley started asking when Preston would come back. Reed requested help designing a treehouse for their backyard. Small steps, steady progress. 3 months after the court ruling, they had their first family dinner. Preston arrived with fresh pasta ingredients and taught the boys how to make sauce from scratch. They made a mess. Tomato sauce splattered on the counters, flour dusting the floor, but the kitchen filled with laughter. After dinner, they sat on the back porch watching fireflies. Finley, never one to dance around difficult questions, turned to Preston. "So you're our real dad?" Preston paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'm your biological father, yes. My DNA helped create you. But being a dad is about more than genetics. It's about showing up, being there, loving you no matter what. I missed the first 6 years of your lives because I didn't know you existed. But I'm here now, and I'd like to be your dad in every way that matters. If that's okay with you both." Reed considered this with his typical practicality. "Will you help us build the treehouse? Every weekend if you want." "Okay then." Reed nodded, satisfied. "You can be our dad." Colette watched from the porch swing, a glass of iced tea sweating in her hand. This family didn't look like the one she'd envisioned on that destroyed wedding day. It was messier, more complicated, stitched together from broken pieces. But it was real, honest, built on truth instead of illusions. The fertility clinic lawsuit settled 6 months after the court ruling. The payout was substantial enough to secure college funds for both boys, with enough left over for Colette to donate a significant portion to organizations supporting other families affected by medical negligence. She wanted something good to come from the pain. Meanwhile, Damon's world continued collapsing. His board of directors voted him out of his CEO position. Major investors pulled their funding. The Hartley empire, that had taken 3 generations to build, was crumbling under the weight of his arrogance and the massive financial judgment. Business publications ran features analyzing his downfall, how pride and assumption had cost him everything. He became a cautionary tale in MBA programs, the billionaire who valued his ego over truth. Simone vanished into the European social scene, her brief marriage to Damon nothing more than a footnote. Last anyone heard, she was in Monaco, already attached to a different wealthy businessman. Some people never changed, but Colette had. She'd gone from a woman destroyed by abandonment to someone who'd rebuilt her life on her own terms. The $100 million settlement gave her financial security, but the real wealth was sitting on her back porch. 2 boys building with their father, laughter floating through the evening air. Preston caught her eye and smiled. Not the practiced charm Damon had wielded like a weapon, but something genuine, earned through patience and showing up. This wasn't the fairy tale she'd dreamed of 6 years ago. It was better, because it was real. 7 years after that destroyed wedding, Colette woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window on a Sunday morning in late October. She made coffee and stepped onto her back porch, wrapping a cardigan around herself against the autumn chill. The leaves had turned brilliant shades of amber and burgundy, drifting lazily across the grass where Finley and Reed were playing soccer with Preston. Her phone buzzed. An email from her publisher. "Congratulations. The Mountain That Learned to Fly just hit the New York Times bestseller list." She smiled, set the phone down, and watched her family instead. Preston caught the ball and hoisted Finley onto his shoulders while Reed protested that it wasn't fair. Their laughter carried across the yard, pure, unguarded joy. This man who'd been a stranger 2 years ago was now the center of their world. Not because DNA said he should be, but because he'd shown up, consistently, genuinely. Colette thought about that morning 7 years ago when she'd stood in a wedding gown, 4 months pregnant, believing her future was certain. She remembered the text message, the wilting roses, the public humiliation that had felt like drowning. If someone had told her then that the man who abandoned her would lose everything while she gained something infinitely more valuable, she wouldn't have believed it. The pain had been too fresh, too devastating. But here's what she'd learned. Sometimes what looks like an ending is actually a door opening to something you never knew you needed. Damon had thought walking away from that altar would be her destruction. He'd assumed she'd crumble under the weight of his rejection, disappear into obscurity while he continued building his empire. Instead, he'd built his own downfall. Every assumption, every lie, every moment he'd chosen pride over truth had laid the foundation for his collapse. The DNA test that should have destroyed her had only destroyed his carefully constructed facade. And from those ruins, something real had grown. A family
As this
built not
story
on wealth
comes
or
to a
appearances,
close,
but
it
on
leaves behind
honesty.
something
A
more than
career
just
earned through her
entertainment.
own talent.
Stories
Security
like
that
this
couldn't be taken
often
away
mirror
because
the
she'd built it with her
complicated
own hands.
emotions people face in real life: love, pride, misunderstanding, ambition, and sometimes regret. When powerful personalities collide, even the smallest movement can lead to consequences no one expected. But now the story belongs to you as much as it belongs to the characters. What did you think about the choices they made? Do you believe the ending was fair? Or would you have handled the situation differently if you were in their place? Every viewer brings a different perspective, and your thoughts might reveal a side of the story others never considered. I had really liked to hear your opinion, so take a moment and share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story kept you engaged or made you reflect on relationships and life decisions, please take a second to press the like button. It's a simple way to support the channel and helps this story reach more viewers who enjoy emotional storytelling. And if you are someone who enjoys powerful stories about billionaires, CEOs, and the complicated world of human emotions, make sure you subscribe. New stories are shared regularly here, each one designed to surprise you, move you, and sometimes even challenge the way you see certain situations. You can also help the channel grow by sharing this channel and sharing this story with someone who enjoys dramatic storytelling. Thank you for watching and for being the part of storytelling journey.